Let's get back into Culture Shift here on WDET, coming to you live from the Cass Corridor. I'm Ryan Patrick Hooper. Thank you so much for hanging out with me on this rainy afternoon here in Detroit. Again, I got to highlight these great new music beds that we have on the show. Again, Detroit musicians. We are trying to represent locally made music in every inch and crevice of the show. This is the track Family Tree by Kevin Reynolds. We're going to get into more Detroit-made music later on for the dance party today at 1:40, but it's about lunchtime here on Culture Shift, and one of the main things that we do on this show is to highlight the culinary scene here in Detroit, which of course we know is great and very diverse. We're getting more and more national attention, and that is very, very exciting. And I think one of the best restaurants to get a finger on the pulse of what this dining scene is here in the city of Detroit and Metro Detroit is over at FRAMEbar in Hazel Park. And I say that because they bring in rotating chef residencies, sometimes for a one-night-only dinner, sometimes for an entire month, like they are doing with their new concept called Filipino Bar at FRAMEbar. And this is from a couple of chefs that go by Sarap Detroit. And they're bringing Filipino cuisine to FRAMEbar just in time for Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And to talk a little bit about this, we are joined by the forces behind Sarap Detroit. That includes Dorothy Hernandez, co-founder of Sarap Detroit. Dorothy, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Ryan.
And we also have Jake Williams, co-founder of Sarap Detroit as well. Jake, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you both here with us today. And Dorothy, I'm going to start with you. You know, when we think about Filipino food and its representation here in Metro Detroit, are there a lot of places where people can dive into Filipino cuisine here?
There are quite a few places around Metro Detroit. There is a pretty vibrant and close-knit Filipino community in Southeast Michigan. But as someone who's not from the area, I moved here a few years ago. I'm from Chicago originally. And one of the reasons why I started Sarap, and we can get more into this later, but I didn't know any Filipinos. I had one friend who had a Filipino friend, so we obviously bonded over food, of course. So that's how we became friends. But I didn't really know where to go. I didn't know a lot of people. So after a while, I was telling Jake, we should do a pop-up. This was in 2014, where pop-ups are still a thing, but I feel like it was really having a moment back then. Like, it seemed like everyone was doing a pop-up, but I didn't see a lot of Filipino pop-ups, and I figured, well, there's an opportunity for us to do a Filipino pop-up because these pop-ups are such great platforms to discover different cuisines and all the creativity of the different producers and makers and chefs and cooks in the Metro Detroit area. So I wanted to bring a little piece of my interpretation of Filipino food to Metro Detroit. And since then, it's been really amazing to see all the new businesses come up, not just in Metro Detroit, but also around the country. Like just here, there's Isla in Sterling Heights. They're doing amazing things. There's also like the longtime staples, like there's Ito Ramen. The chef there is Filipino, and he does a lot of different fun things with Filipino food. There's Edamame in Madison Heights. There and like the newer businesses, I mentioned Isla. There's also Jonathan Peregrino. He does JP Makes and Bakes. Shout out to him. He does amazing desserts, and he also has a pop-up coming up at Folk Detroit. So I just want to shout out to him. And we also love Folk and Rohani and what she's doing there. So it's just really exciting to combine, my love of Filipino food through just kind of the lens of being in Michigan, surrounded by so much creative talent and local producers.
Dorothy, you touched on something really important, which is that idea of finding community through food. Within Filipino culture, talk about that role that food really plays on that family community scale.
Yes, I feel like food is just like the biggest thing for Filipinos and culture. Like if you go to somebody's house, they'll ask you if you've eaten, and then you'll eat, and then you'll eat while you're there, and then when you leave, they'll give you food. Like it's just so much food. But that's what I love about it. And when I started the pop-up, like I was saying, I didn't really know a lot of people, but I got to know so many people, and they, they all came out to support me. Everyone in like so many people in the Filipino community, and a lot of them have become my friends. There's a informal group called the Detroit Filipino Supper Club. I got to shout them out too. So many of them come to my pop-ups all the time, so it's become like this amazing family, and like we've done their weddings, catered their special events. So for me, it's very personal. Like it's what I'm doing with the pop-up is maybe not representative of all the Filipino restaurants in the area, but for me, I do it because, finding that community, building community, just keeping that connection, and just making new friends all the time. It's really amazing.
Let's talk a little bit about the food itself. For some of these recipes, these flavors, where are they coming from? Is this meals that you'd be having growing up? I mean, what are the origins for some of the stuff that you end up bringing for Sarap Detroit?
So when I first started, since I wanted to just bring more awareness to Filipino cuisine, because I would meet people who weren't Filipino, and they maybe would know like pancit, which is noodles, or lumpia, which are spring rolls. These are like staples you would find at any Filipino party. So of course I would have that, but I first started doing like, maybe dishes I grew up with, or that are more traditional, like adobo. So they were kind of like pretty straightforward, versions of it, because I always wanted to stay true to my culture and pay respect to it, and not do crazy things. But as the pop-up progressed, I was realizing like people really enjoyed like the different spins to it, because I feel like a lot of people love, if they grew up with Filipino food, they love their mom's food or their Lola's food, their grandmother's. And I'm never going to cook better than Lola. Like I quickly learned like, Lola's food is better. My mom's food is better. She cooks better than me. So I didn't want to like do food that people could get at home or somebody's house. So I really started to like do, more creative things. Of course, I'll still have the staples. Like we have lumpia, because you got to have lumpia. We have pancit, but I made it vegetarian, vegetable forward, because a lot of times it comes with like chicken or shrimp or pork. I mean, you could still get pork. But I really wanted to highlight like the different vegetables. We'll use local mushrooms, things like that. And then some of the other dishes, I really had fun playing with this menu, because we wanted it to be shareable. We wanted it to be, kind of fun, because it's in a bar. So we have a lot of like different snacks. It's called pulatan, and that's like drinking food. So, and then like some of the things that we've had through our travels, like we went to the Philippines with my parents a few years ago, and we were really inspired by that trip. So we came back with lots of like different ideas to try for our pop-up. We have something called kinilaw, that is raw fish cured in vinegar. And we have a beef tartare. That's not something you would usually have at a Filipino restaurant per se, but we put a Filipino spin on it by using like Filipino seasonings like soy sauce and calamansi, and then serving it with pandesal, which is a bread roll, but we make it into like crostini.
Yum. I mean, that's the whole point. If you're talking to chefs on the radio, you have to have some sort of mouth-watering moment when we start talking about some of these dishes. And I think you said something really important. Like, you didn't want to go crazy with it. You didn't want to modify some of these traditional dishes to a point where they weren't recognizable, which I think so much with Asian cuisine is something that we see get into it, where people say things like elevated Chinese food or trying to modify the origins of it. And it kind of brings in a lot of racial implications into the origins of that food and how we view that food here in the Western canon. So can you talk about that importance of making sure that this is accurate, this is representative of what Filipino cuisine is?
Yeah, I think that's such a great point, because a lot of times this question of authenticity comes up. And, everyone has like their idea of what authentic is. And I think a lot of people will think, well, it's not authentic because it's not how my mom makes it. But the Philippines is 7,000 islands. Like if you went to somebody's house in a different province, like they're not going to make adobo that the way your mom makes it. Does it make it less authentic? It's authentic to place and where they live. Like a lot of times Filipinos will cook, what is ever available. Like if it's if they're going to make sinigang, which is a sour tamarind soup. When we were in the Philippines visiting my mom's family, they went into the backyard and grabbed, souring agents for the soup. It's usually tamarind, but it could be anything sour. And that's another thing I want to point out about Filipino food. A lot of it is like processes. Like, a lot of people are familiar with adobo, but that refers to the process of which it's cooked. It's basically usually meat. You could do vegetables too, but it's food braised in vinegar, and that's what makes it adobo. Kinilaw, I mentioned earlier, is also a process, and that's curing fish in vinegar. And then kare-kare, which is a Filipino version of like curry. That's also a process too. So Filipinos know how to, apply these processes to whatever they have available. So if they have, they have local shrimp, they'll make shrimp sinigang. If they have, we had a pop-up a few years ago where we were working with a local farm, and they gave us all these beautiful proteins, and we had lamb and duck, and maybe those aren't things that you would see typically in a Filipino adobo, but that's what was local to us. So we always like to cook with local products. We like to cook seasonally and just highlight the ingredients that we're using.
We're talking to Dorothy Hernandez, co-founder of Sarap Detroit. We're also joined here in Jake Williams, another co-founder and chef behind it, Sarap Detroit. They're going to be at FRAMEbar in Hazel Park, kicking off on May 3rd. They'll be doing a brunch on May 7th. That sounds incredible, and it'll be there all the way through June 4th. You can find out more information about it at framehazelpark.com. Jake Williams, let's get you involved in the conversation here. What was attractive to you about cooking Filipino food? How did you first get involved?
Besides the obvious, Dorothy asking me to help with a pop-up, I've always had a love of geography and where it intersects with food. So it was very, very, appealing and appetizing for me to find out more about Filipino food. And the underlying thing after Dorothy and I had visited the Philippines, besides her mention of it being hyper-local, was vinegar. And I would say that's the underlying theme. And feel free to interject, Dorothy. But for me, with all the islands there are a variety of different vinegars. And that's the thing that ties Filipino food together, in my opinion. So really exploring that vinegar quality of the different islands. Some of them are as thick and as dark as molasses. Some of them look like whole milk, can have that same mouthfeel. You're probably familiar with like apple cider vinegar, distilled vinegar. Some of those types are used as well. But for me, it was exploring that vinegar flavor and how it permeates throughout all the foods and ties all of those islands together as previous to refrigeration. That was the main way to preserve food. So some of the foods Dorothy already mentioned, like kinilaw, adding the vinegar to it, adobo. We do a version of adobo that honors Dorothy's mother. It has coconut milk in it. And even speaking to other Filipinos, people, they're like, oh, really? Coconut milk? You put that in it? So it's regional, like Dorothy said, but it's also hyper-local. So the appeal to me was utilizing Midwest Great Lakes ingredients and putting Filipino flavors into it. So instead of maybe using milkfish at some of our pop-ups, we'll use trout or walleye or other things like that. So it was really exciting to be able to bring my knowledge of some of those foods and mix it with the geography that we have here in the Midwest. That was really the most appealing thing for me.
You know, that flavor profile of using vinegar for a lot of things, that's very exciting to my palate. But could you run me through some of the other like primary flavors that kind of end up repeating themselves throughout these menus? Some of the themes that tie this all together?
I would say the other main theme would be there's a lot of soy sauce throughout it, and Dorothy probably has a better handle on some of that as well, as far as the main themes. There's always some crunch involved, whether it's in lumpia or fried garlic in the rice. So those are probably the two most prevalent themes that I see beyond that. So just absolutely delicious. And I really want to emphasize the hospitality is really, really the forward thing that I saw in the Philippines as well. So we try to bring that to the table as well. So absolutely just like Dorothy said, every place that we visited in the Philippines or anytime we go into a Filipino household, it's always the food is at the forefront. And I see that over and over again. And that's what we try to bring to the table as well.
Yeah, it's really exciting to get a window into a living room, a seat at the table of a Filipino family here in Metro Detroit. It sounds like that's what's happening here. Let's start going through this menu a little bit. I want to make people starve. I want to force them to be like, you know what? I am booking my reservation now at FRAMEbar to check out Sarap Detroit. Again, they're going to open it up next week. Talk to me about this smash burger, because this was the first thing that popped off the menu to me and sounded incredible. And I don't want to scare people, but banana ketchup is listed in the items that are part of this smash burger.
Yeah, so I just want to go back a little bit, talking about different flavors and I guess what would typify Filipino food. I want to point out that the Philippines draws from so many different influences. Trade with China. That's why we have a lot of soy sauce. That's why we have a lot of noodles. That's why we have egg rolls. It's called one type of egg roll is called lumpia Shanghai, and it's their take on Chinese egg rolls. So that's where that influence comes in. And then when the Spaniards colonized the Philippines, they brought a lot of their influences as well. They would see adobo, and that's why people kind of mix it up with not the adobo of the Philippines, but different adobo, because they saw how they were cooking it and they called it adobo and it just stuck. But I think what is so great about and then another obvious influence is the U.S. When the military was there, they brought Spam, and we have wholeheartedly embraced that. So I think that's what I love about Filipino food is just the creativity and innovation. We have all these influences, but we made it our own. So that's kind of what kind of guides me when I try to come up with interesting things for the menu. Because like I said, I don't want to do stuff that maybe people are used to or you can get at home. Because I want them to experience something new, or maybe when they experience it, it reminds them of something that they're familiar with, but it's in a new way. Because I always want to it means a lot to me that people want to come to Sarap and try our food. So I want it to be a good experience. So that's what I was thinking when I came up with this menu. A lot of it, it's things that I like to eat, things that my mom taught me, inspired by our different travels. So this in Boracay, which is this beautiful island, and we also went there too. It's it's an experience. It's kind of like a party island, but it's fun. So they have a chori burger that's really that's popular. It's a popular bar food. Because you can walk up and down the beach and go bar hopping. But we just love burgers. So I was just it would be so much fun if we kind of took what your typical smash burger is, but then kind of transformed it into this chori burger that's popular in Boracay. So it kind of melds all of those different influences. So there's a popular Filipino sausage called longanisa. So we combined that with ground beef to make the hamburger patty. We make our own banana ketchup, and this is another example of how Filipinos make do with what they have. At the time of its creation, tomatoes were really expensive, but bananas were plentiful. So instead of using tomatoes, they used bananas and made banana ketchup. And now you'll use that on everything. You'll put it on rice. You'll put it on your burger. You'll put it with your eggs. It's one of those standard condiments. And then garlic aioli, and then all the fixins of a smash burger like lettuce, onions. Achara is a pickled green papaya salad. So we put that on there for like some extra tang. And then we work with Rising Stars, and they make these beautiful ube brioche buns. And ube is a purple yam, and it like blew up, and now you see ube everywhere. So we wanted to, have our Instagrammable dish. So if you want to put it in the gram, get this dish.
I think I can eat 6 of these Troy smash burgers after the way you described them. They sound absolutely incredible. We're going to wrap up here with you guys picking like your favorite thing on the menu that you really want people to try. So, Jake, I'm going to have you go first. What is your favorite thing on this menu that if people are coming and they're getting one dish, let's say, what would you want them to get?
So if you're going to get one dish, I would say the Kenny Lau. We're working with Motor City Seafood to source a lot of different fish for this. So we'll have rotating fish. And I think it's really representative of the Philippines. There's 9,000 different vinegars plus within the Philippines. So we're going to be using some coconut vinegar and some coconut milk, and it's going to be absolutely delicious. So the Kenny Lau is going to be number one for me.
Dorothy, smash burgers out. You got to pick a different one. What is that one item you want everyone to try when they go see Sarap at FRAMEbar in Hazel
How am
Park?
I going to just pick one? This is terrible. I mean, these are like all of my creations.
These are your babies.
They
I know,
are
but you
my
have
babies. I don't wanna
every
pick
parent
one.
has a favorite baby. Let's be honest. Which is yours?
I don't know. I feel like if you're going to come, the crispy pata is probably the thing that you want to get. So it's a deep fried pork leg. And it's going to be like a pretty big pork leg, and it's going to be like I love Korean barbecue. So I love like making like the lettuce wraps. So I kind of borrowed from Korean barbecue to like you'll take the lettuce and you put the rice, and then you put the crispy pata, which will be like crispy on the outside but nice and tender on the inside, and make like a little lettuce wrap. So I think if you want to get something, they're all good, but I feel like I want to highlight that one because I think a lot of people will be excited about that one. I'm excited about it.
Personal recommendations from the chefs of Sarap, Detroit. They will be at FRAMEbar starting on May 3rd. It runs through June 4th. You can head over to framehazelpark.com to be able to make your reservations. There's also going to be a brunch service that's part of that. You can see all of the details and the entire menu over at framehazelpark.com. We are joined by those chefs, Dorothy Hernandez and Jake Williams from Sarap, Detroit, which I think you have both done a fantastic job representing Filipino culture here in Metro Detroit, and also just making everybody's mouth water during this conversation. Dorothy and Jake, thank you so much.
Salamat.
Thank you.